Hi, everyone. Just doing a camera check. Oh, look. Hi, everyone. Oh, I should put some lotion on my hands. Let's see who we have today. Hey, Christine. Hey, Rose. Oh, Lorene, that's me. And let's see who we got. Oh, Jen. Hey, Jen. How's it going? We got a few more minutes to go. So Christine was saying in the chat that she's all quilted and ready to go, and I went, oh shoot, I didn't quilt mine, but I did quilt this one a little bit, which this is next week's project. I did quilt that one a little bit, so then I'm like, oh, maybe I should have. Good idea, Christine. I guess I should put all my marking pens in there. Let's see. There we go. How's that? So if you wanted it taller, let me see. Is it? So then it would be longer if you wanted it taller. Hey, Cammie. So I'm trying to remember. Isn't that okay? My brain's not working. It was only half working Thursday class. Now it's one quarter working. So 2 fabrics. I'm putting shape flex on each one, and today I decided I'll press it on camera so you can see how I do mine, which means you need a damp pressing cloth. So mine was damp, but it's dried out. Now I'm going to go make it damp again. Now I'm a little more than damp, but it does pay sometimes to read the instructions that come with your any interfacing you get. So if you ever buy interfacing, like at Joann's or what is it, Hobby Lobby or any place like that, Walmart, make sure that they cut you off a piece of the paper instructions, and make sure the section you get is in the language you speak or read. Because as it rolls out, excuse me, it comes in different languages. And if you only get a small piece, then you might not have your own language. That wouldn't be helpful. Because my recommendation, whenever you're buying interfacing, especially the shape flex or the Decra Bond, or you're buying steam a seam, whatever, get a yard at least. Because you're going to use, it's not going to go bad, you're going to use it. So Jennifer's asking, why is it important that the pressing cloth be damp, and how does that cloth help? Well, number one, it's important because the instructions tell you to do that. How's that? So it creates the steam to help melt the glue, but in the pressing cloth is, if you feel your shape flex, I mean, look, you can see through it. It's very thin, so you don't want the iron directly on it. So for one reason, because it's thin, and for another reason is because you don't want any junk on your iron. I get more junk on my iron from not using my pressing cloth for this than I do with my steam and seam. So I've tried to, over the last few months, I've tried to, walk the walk, so to speak, do what I say, have myself do what I say. Never mind getting you guys to do what I say. So this is going to be a quick and easy project. Where we got another minute. So let me get my pressing little area ready here. My little baby pressing area. And I wanted a little extra body because Shape Flex is pretty light. And it comes in handy for a couple of reasons. If you have a thin fabric, like this is a fairly thin fabric. See? So number one, it helps not see through it. So it isn't see-through, but it helps also if you've got a thinner fabric to just give it a little more oomph, so to speak. So I cut my Shape Flex, or whatever interfacing you're going to use, I cut it a 1/2 inch smaller than the rectangle. So this rectangle is 6 by 10, 2 pieces, outside and lining. And so I cut 2 pieces of Shape Flex, 5.5 by 9.5, and I just centered it on. It's just it keeps a little bit of it out of the seam, and also it keeps you from shape flexing onto your ironing surface if you've made it too big. So let me check my iron. So I'm going to get this one ready. Glue side, so wrong side of fabric, glue side of this down. You can feel it's bumpy. And you don't want to see how that thread is there? So if I shape flex that now, that thread's there forever. So I'm just going to get that one ready. Going to put my little, and my pressing cloth, I have a good one somewhere, but I generally take a piece of muslin and use that, because after a while it really could become kind of gunky. So we're pressing. We're not ironing, we're pressing. And I would normally probably count to about 10 or so. Oh, can you see the steam coming up? I'm getting a little sauna. So I'm going to go a little faster just for time's sake. So, you know, watching someone iron, I'm sure, isn't the thrill of your day. So watching somebody else iron and you don't have to probably is pretty good. And then I'm going to turn it over, and now I've got that fabric. So I'm just going to give it just a little more of a press. So you would hold it down about count to 10. And I'm lifting as I go across. You probably can't see it, but I really am. And now don't be lazy and just put your other one on top of this one. That'd be me talking to me. Okay, double check, wrong side of fabric, glue side down. Okay, so Jen's asking, should we ever be concerned that the heat from a wool pressing mat? Yes. Yes, will warp your cutting mat. Yes, so you wouldn't be, and you just have to kind of keep an eye on or feel the bottom. It really depends how long you're doing it. And I did it just a week or so ago. I was doing a lot of pressing, and I lifted my mat up with my big mat, and I had a bit of a bow in my mat. So I just put something real heavy on it, and it pressed it back down. So try to avoid that. So yes, because it does go through. So you hopefully would be at your ironing station. And because I made this extra damp, it's still damp for two or three rounds here. And you can tell when you look at your pressing cloth where you've pressed and where you haven't, because some places will be nicer than others. You'll notice it. And really make sure you get those edges. And remember, if you've got an iron with lots of holes and lots of indents, because it makes it look pretty, you're not getting any weight on all the areas that have all those holes and so forth. And it's especially important when you're using steam machine. So I always make sure, instead of going to the end of my fabric, which is right there, with the end of my iron, I'm going past the end, because I seem to have the issue of my ends fused, especially with steam machine, as much as the middle is. And I don't know if you can see. So there you go. So see, there's places where it's all gunky or stained, or I don't know if that's the water or what that is. But after a while, I'll just throw this out. After it's served its purpose, it's time for it to go. When I made my little pen holder basket, I forgot to make it the same color as the inside of that one. The outside's the same, but the inside's not. So I had to rectify that today. So I'm feeling underneath, Jen, and there's no heat yet, but I am getting the steam come through a little bit. So yeah, you want to be really, really careful. So when I'm sitting here pressing anything, I'm doing it so that it can be on the camera, and I can't bring my whole pressing table over. And I already have 2 cameras going. I have to have a third. And where would I put that? But anyways, I fully expect that you'll be at your regular ironing board or your pressing station or wherever you are. If you want to use your wool mat, just put it on top of your ironing board or put it on top of your pressing station. And that would be fine. Okay, so we got our 2 pieces. Oh, you're welcome, Jen. Thanks for asking, because if you're asking it, that probably means other people want to know. They will also want to know. Okay, so this is going to be pretty easy. We're going to have an easy couple of Saturdays because we deserve it. So we're going to turn our fabric. I'll face it towards you. We're going to turn our fabric so it's lengthways. So this is facing towards you. And we're just going to put right sides together. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew down each short side, okay? So we'll just take and remember how we put a pin or a clip, whichever one you want, onto the side that we're sewing. So when we get over to the sewing machine, because it's a long way from right here to right here, when we get over to the sewing machine, we won't pick the long side to go down, because I think that would probably be the natural inclination. So otherwise we don't really need to pin. And I know some of you will go, oh, I have to pin, but you pin if you want to pin. I find for me over the years, over the last 100 years, that the more I pin, the worse I do. So apparently I don't have any pinning skills. So about a 1/2 inch, so more than a 1/4, and it doesn't matter. Just do them both the same. Don't do a little skimpy one here. So I'm going to say let's do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, because we want to be able to press this open. And when you have that 1/4 inch seam allowance, it's such a bear to try to press that open. So we're going to go down the short side, okay? And just as a little aside, I made this just for you guys, because I know it can be annoying that I have to keep putting my clips back every time I use them throughout the video. So I made this, so now I can just throw them back in the bucket, and I'm okay with that. And I can hear you all applauding, right? Everybody's applauding. Thank God we don't have to wait for her to put her clips back. Okay, so we're ready to sew. Pin on the short side, right sides together. So we're looking at shape flex on both sides. Okay, so let's go sew. I have a, I had my finger on the wrong button. I have Microtex 70, let me see, what is it, 80, 12, 75, 11, 70, 70, 10. Contact. Had a moment there. 70, 10 needle Microtex and regular sewing thread, top and bottom, regular sewing stitch, just a regular straight stitch. And I'm going to use my little lines right here because you can see that's a 1/4 inch. And then that's 5/8, so I'm going to be in between. But generally, I just go a little past the edge of my J-foot. So J-foot, baby lot brother. Give me a second. Janome is the A-foot. Same foot, just a different letter. And I am going to do a little locking stitch. So I'm just going to lock in place. If you don't have that ability, just go, 3 forward, 3 back. I do have to take the pins out and put those away. So I'm at the end again. So I'm going to lock at the other end. Okay, then I'm just going to turn around. Well, I'm not turning around. The fabric's turning around. And go down the other side. Remember, look for your pin. Ooh, got close there, didn't I, to that pin? I want to make sure this is smoothed. So I probably ended up with a skimpy seam allowance, just, I guess, out of habit. So let's see how we did. And we're going to press. So, if we sew, we press. Oh, thanks, Jen. Isn't it cute? It was a fat quarter, a couple fat. Well, this part, the plaid part is some of my leftover Easter fabric. And now that I did this, I'm wondering if I was supposed to be saving that for a project I was working on. Does that ever happen to you guys? You use a fabric you thought you were saving? So we're going to take it. Here's our seams, and we're just going to take and match the seams in the middle. But before I match them to the middle, I'm just going to offset them because I want to press these seams open. And you could use your roller. This fabric isn't going to stretch because we've got the shape flex on it. So I want to open that seam. And in case you don't know, opening the seam just means half the seam is on one side, half is on the other. Okay, it just makes it a little flatter. I'm going to flip it over and see this seam is here, the other one's over here. So I'm not messing with the seam that I've already got nice and pressed. And I do press down with my finger first, only because sometimes these small seams are hard to get open using the nose. I call it the nose. I call this the nose of the iron. Okay? Look, we're almost halfway done. Now we want to line up so both seam allowances or both seams are together. I'll even clip this time. I'm going to clip on either side of the seam. And we don't have to, we're not going to be, you know how when we are doing quilting blocks and stuff, how we nestle the seams. Well, that would be this one seam allowance is on one side, the other seam allowance on the other. We want these flat. So that seam, the actual seam, they should be lining up. And we want to line up the bottom one as well. And when we line it up, we're also lining up our fabric in this direction. And you can just do that little finger press there. Just so you know that you've pushed this down and there's no like more fabric under here than over here, because once we start stitching here, wherever this fold is where it's going to be. We don't want to iron it. We don't need to iron it, but we just want to make sure. So if you just push with your fingers, make sure both fabrics are going down, and then push to make sure, and make sure I can feel along here to make sure there's no ridges or bumps, that the fabric underneath is folded. Just turn it over and look. Everybody looks good. Okay? So now you've got to determine which part is your lining and which part is your outside. So I was trying to decide if I should do it opposite. So I know I have I'm odd. I have to have my lining on the left side and my outside fabric on the right. I don't know why. I really don't know why. So my lining fabric, we need to have an opening to turn. So I am going to put, oh, I gotta go this way. Sorry, I gotta go towards me. I'm gonna put my 2 pins in. So my 2 stopping pins. So I'm gonna stitch along and stop, and then I'm gonna, maybe I gotta come up a little higher. I'll measure and tell you how far away from the seam I am. I can take that clip out. And then I'm going to go ahead and put 2 pins down this and down this section. And the reason I'm doing that, and I think I told you last week, but the reason I'm doing that, I'll show you in a second. Okay, so if I come stitching down here, I know when I see 2 pins. So I come stitching along here. I know when I see 2 pins, I need to stop. And I'm going to stop and lock it. Rather than jump over and start here and go, I will turn this over and stitch from the corner to the 2 pins again. Does that make sense? Hey, Alberta. So I could stitch down, stop, lock, start, lock, and come to the end. But I'm going to come down to my pin, stop, lock, turn my fabric over, start at this end, come down to my pin, stop, lock. It makes more sense to me. Glad you made it, Alberta. And we only need to do this on one side. And I have, let's see, my opening is about 2 inches. And, oh, let me get up in the view here. Hold on. There we go. So let's see. My pins are, here's my 1 inch mark. So my pins are just past the 1 inch mark. And from my seam, it's about 1.5. I could be a little closer. I don't want to be too close to my seam because I have to turn this under, remember, and close it up after. And I think that's enough room because I'll stop at where the pins start. So I'll be stitching up just about that inch. And I'll be stitching and stopping about 1.5 inches from that seam. Okay, so I'll have a little over, about 2.25 inches is the opening. You'll learn over time to try to make your opening smaller because you'll be surprised what can fit through that small opening. You just don't want to be near your seam and you don't want to be near the edge. Okay? Oh, hi, Lynn. The other thing we got to keep in mind is we're going to be boxing our corners. So I'm trying to think. We better come up to the second pin just to be on the safe side. So we better come up 1.25 inches. So I'm going to just put my 2 little pins closer together. I always stop at the first pin. So I've got my pins at about 1.25 inches. And if you're feeling nervous, oh, I just pinned myself. I am, yeah, it's about, well, about 1 inch, a little more than 1.25 inches in this direction. So that gives me a good full 2 inches, 2.25 inches. Okay? We ready to go? So we're gonna stitch down, lock the stitch, and I would do 3 back for that extra strength. Then I'm gonna turn my my project over and start from this end, lock, and stitch up here and lock. And then we'll just come down this whole side. We're going to lock at the beginning, lock at the end. But you can lock in place here if you want to. But here I really want you to come up and do 3 back. Because that gives it that little extra strength. So if you're struggling to get the fabric through the opening, it just gives you that little bit extra strength that you might need. Okay? So let's go sew. Okay, so I'm going to take care of the side that requires a little thinking first, get that out of the way. So I'm doing the long end first. And we're going to use about the same seam allowance as before. So mine's a little more than 1/4. So my fabric is just, I think you can see it right there. It's just barely past the foot. So I'm going to lock in place. Oh, look, throw it in the bucket. Okay, I'm coming to where my pins are. Taking both the pins out, and I'm going to go back 3. Okay, now I'm going to do this section, so I'm just going to flip it over and work the exact same way I did on the other side. So I'm going to lock in place, and I'm going to stitch till I get to that first pin. I'm going to go 3 back. Okay, now I just need to turn the fabric around and do the other side. Just start at one end and go all the way to the other end. So I'm going to lock in place. I do like my new clip basket. Oh, so my seam picked up. I just got to stop, scooch it back down. Make sure that this feels nice and flat. I'm still lined up with the underneath fabric along that edge. And I'm just going to lock in place. Okay, so back to our work table. Everybody doing good so far? Hey, Lynn, it's okay to be late. So, we stitched, so we press. And while we're at it, we're going to press our opening. So my opening is right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to act like I'm pressing open my seam, except I'm only doing one side at a time. So I want to pull the seam back where I know that there is stitching, because then I know that the seam is turned the right amount. And when I do that, and if you have your regular iron, put a little steam on it. Let me hold this up. So I folded over the seam allowance where the stitching is, and I folded it, and don't worry about this out here. I folded it along the stitching, and folding this part along the stitching automatically helps you fold the part that doesn't have stitching. Okay? And if I turn it over and do the exact same thing, I'm folding back to the stitching. The only part we really care about is the opening. See, the opening is there, but look now how neat it is. Okay? Hot but neat. All right, so we know our opening is, when we turn it right side out, is going to be fine. So does anybody have any questions yet? I had to take a drink. Whenever I say, does anybody have any questions, I take a second so I'm not coughing. Okay, so now this is our inside, this is our outside, and it doesn't matter if you this way, it doesn't matter. I just wanted you to be next to, so you could see this. See how neat now that opening will be when you go to stitch it together. Okay, so lining, outside. Does it matter which is first? No. You just want to make sure your opening is in the lining. So now this is going to be a little fussy because it's small, but we're pulling these apart because we want to box the corners. And the shape flex, for me, made it kind of hard to grab onto. So I'm just grabbing it this way and pulling it apart from each other. And my goal is to make my little tent-like shape. I want my seam to be in the center. So if I'm struggling with my seam there, let me get my scissors, because it's attached, I'm going to clip just a little bit so that I can flatten that out more. But my goal is, my goal is to have the seam evenly between the two sides, and making sure that my fabric is nice and flat. So you see where we did that little finger press? So that finger press really should line up with this seam. Okay, I'm just going to give this a little press for a second so I can show it to you easier. Okay, so there's the center of my seam. I want to make sure I have even amount on either side. And again, where we finger pressed and had that little crease, that crease can run right along that seam. Okay? And once we have that, let's see. I don't know if it'll get in the way or not, but let's just put a pin right there for now. And we'll go around to the other side before we mark it. And now this one I didn't iron open. And you can go ahead and iron it open or not. It really doesn't matter. Because what I want you to see is, if I can grab a hold of these fabric. Alberta, I did the measurements at the beginning of the video. And also on Facebook, it's 6 by 10. 2 pieces, 6 by 10. But at the beginning of this video, I show you putting the shade flex on and cutting that also. Okay? Okay, so if I leave my seam allowance this time going in one direction, what I want to look at is your eye wants to look at this seam allowance to be in the middle. You want the seam to be in the middle. So the seam should be right at the point. And I know this probably sounds silly, but I really have to say to myself, okay, look at the stitching, look at the stitching. Because your eye wants to go over here. Here's your stitching right here. And again, you've got your crease in the back that you can line up with that stitching. Okay, so we're going to do this side before, we have to do this, but let's go ahead and mark this side first. So I'm just going to flatten them both out. Oh, remember, it looks like the cootie catcher. Remember the cootie catcher? Does anybody remember the cootie catcher? All right. Come on, Rose, save me here. I'm just flattening these out so I can mark them. So let's see if I can do this facing you. So I've got it nice and flat. Maybe this way's better. I've got it nice and flat. And you don't need to line up the guy underneath perfectly. You're not marking both at the same time. But what we want to do is let's get rid of that pin. And I'm going to use my, I love my 2.5 inch square ruler. What we want to do is, you know what, that might be too hard. Because it's hard, sometimes it's hard to read where the 2 is. So let's find where this 2 is on our ruler. And we're gonna start up at the top. And we're gonna go straight down until we're 2 inches across. Does that work better this way? Wait a minute. Hold on, let me get my display. Okay, so my 1 inch makes it to the middle. We want 2 inches from one edge of our little tent to the other edge. You see? And we're going to make a mark. Oh, how handy. And we're just going to draw a line across. Okay? Then I'm just going to go ahead and do the other side. Don't need the pin. I'm just going to come down with my ruler until the 2 inches here, and the beginning of the ruler is on the left and the 2 inches on the right. And you just want to make sure that your line of your ruler this way, any line doesn't matter, is lining up straight with that seam stitching. Okay, you see that all right? And we're just going to draw a line across. Okay, now if you want to put a pin down below so it doesn't move on you, you can do that. So these lines should both be in the same place. So mine, see how does one line look shorter than the other? It does to me. So I just want to double check mine. I'm going to come in from the other way. So okay, so this line I'm a little off. So I'm going to pull this out of the way, and I just have to iron that away. See, so you'll never know I did anything wrong. So let's see. Oh, now I got to flip around the other direction. I was just a tad off. Oh, Alberta, you like my ruler? You might have one of these. Can you see? Rose, you don't remember Cootie Catcher? You know, it had the numbers and you did it both directions and you guessed a number and then you picked it up and then you guessed a color and then it would have some kind of saying underneath. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and sew that. Oh yeah, Jen. Jen says my sewing is so neat and accurate. Yeah, you're not getting a close up, Jen. Think. Or it's because I stand up to sew. I think when I stand up to sew, it makes my eyeballs work better, I guess. Okay, so we want to sew right. We're going to sew right on that line. So I'm going to do a locking stitch. Sew across. Do a locking stitch. Make sure you keep an eye on that seam. This one was easy because the seam was open. Make sure you take your pin out that you don't need any longer. Now turn this over, but this is the one I already sewed. I'm going to flip that out of the way. Don't sew the two together. Now this time, my seam allowance is butting up. Let me see if that light, yeah, there we go. That was kind of glary, wasn't it? So see, my seam allowance goes up. The other thing I want to make sure of is that I've pulled these each side apart enough that I don't have a crease in my seam allowance. So my seam allowance is heading that towards the back, which means as we sew, my foot may want to flip it open or flip it over. So we just got to keep an eye on it. And I've got my fingers right here, so I shouldn't have, and they're right on the seam allowance, so it shouldn't flip up. Okay, and make sure you lock the other end. Okay, so back to the work table. Let's see, Rose says, now remember, used to play that a lot. Yeah, well, we called it, I don't know why it was a cootie catcher, but, what you know, had to call it something, I guess. Okay, so we have one side has our box corners. So this time, I don't usually do this, but this time I did. I'm going to cut off the extra. So I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch seam allowance there. Ooh, I know cutting something off is scary, isn't it? Okay, so now we got to do the other end. So I'm pulling the fabrics apart. You can see here's the box then going to the opposite side, making sure it's flat underneath. So as I'm pulling the two top fabrics, I'm pulling them away from each other. my fingers are back here making sure that's nice and smooth. And I can go ahead and put a pin in. And we can go ahead and mark it. Remember the 2 inches. Make sure we got a straight line on our ruler. If you have, I was going to say, if you have see, this ruler doesn't have a 45 on it. This one really doesn't either. If you have a ruler with a 45, you can always run it with that seam allowance. But I think if you just, is it a 45? You're just going to follow this. If you have a ruler that that takes care of this point, is what I was trying to say. But we just need to have a straight line. Doesn't have to be on the seam, but parallel with the seam. Edge of the ruler on one side, the 2-inch mark on the other. Oh. Okay, my pin's in, so everything's all set. Now this is the side with the opening. See, there's my opening right there. So I'm going to, here's my end again, that I'm just going to clip a little bit. I don't want to clip to the seam. I'm just going to clip a little bit, and that's just so I can open that seam up a little bit more. So I got to be careful. Hopefully we're in good shape. We'll see. All right, I'm gonna press my end because see how I got like a little crease going. So I'm just gonna press that. I'm not quite sure why I'm getting that. So I'm gonna put my point turner up in that point. And I think it was just because now it's flat. I think it was just because I didn't have the fabric flat. Now, let's hope that my 2 inches isn't going to run into my opening. If it does, we'd have to stop, open up a little more at this end, and come in and sew down a little bit. But let's see how we do. So my opening it's pretty close. How about yours? Is yours close? So I'm going to be this way. Let's see what happens. See how close I get. I don't want to be too close. Okay. I got my fingers crossed. So there's my line. And my opening's pretty close. So I think, just so you can see how to take care of it, I think what I'll do is I'm going to, can you see how close I am? So I'm going to fold this back together, and I'm going to stitch a little more coming down. And if I need to open this end up a little when I turn it through, I can do that. But I'm not going to touch it for now. Okay? So we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and I can see where my line is. So I want to be like here, 1/2 inch down from my line. Okay? So let's give that a whirl, because this may happen to you. What I want to do is make sure that I stitch. Sorry about that. I want to make sure that I stitch a little bit on the stitching I already did, and I need to lock it, and then come down and lock it again. Okay? So you can see, I can see where my line is for marking. See it? So I want to be about 1/2 inch down from that, and I'm probably not quite a quarter now. So I'm going to put my presser foot down, and I'm going to reach to my turning wheel on the right side of my machine, and I want to make sure that my needle sinks into where I already stitched. And I'm going to lock it. And I've gone about a 1/2 inch past. Oh, and I want to do the 3 back here. Almost forgot. Okay, did that make sense to everyone? So let's see what I can point with. Let me put this light back on. I'll point with this. So here's my mark. And now I went about this much further. My stitching was right about there. And I probably could have got away with it, but, you know, why live on the edge when you don't have to? Alberta's asking, can you put it closer to the center? No, you got a seam, 2 seams here going this way. So I stopped like here. So I don't want to fidget with this seam when I have to sew this opening close. So I'm trying to stay between the two sections. It'll work out. Okay, so I just added a little extra. Then if I come over here, if I'm having trouble getting the fabric through this hole, I'll just get my seam ripper and open that just a little bit to work it. But I'm going to see how it works with that little bit there. See how it all works out. Okay, so now back to the business of getting this back where it was. So nice and flat. Make sure in this case, my seam is open because we pressed it that way. There's my line, but I'm just going to double check. So I'm going to put a pin in further down. I'm just going to line my front and back up and just look and see that my lines are the same on both sides, same distance down. Okay? So let's go sew this up, and we're almost done. And when I lay it down, I check underneath again to make sure everything's nice and flat. I don't have any ripples. Okay? I'm going to lock my stitch, and remember, I'm sewing right on that line I drew. Remember, this isn't your prom dress. You don't have to be perfect. It's just a little busket. You'll get more perfect with the next one. Taking my pin out right away. I told you the story about leaving a pin in a quilt after it was all quilted. Okay, again, turn it to the other side, making sure I feel underneath. Everything's nice and flat. Almost sewed right off the edge. Locked it. Okay, back to our workstation. I sewed that a little crooked. That's okay. I'm going to cut this off, leaving a seam allowance. Almost lost what side I was on there for a minute. Okay. Oh. And you know, if we sew, we press. Now see, you can't tell if I was crooked or not because the line is gone. Okay, so here comes the big test. And now see, I'm a little further away from this end with the opening. So I'm going to reach in to the furthest away end. I'm just going to take my time. and just push a little bit of it out at a time. Who's sewing along today? I know Christine is. I'm guessing Lynn's not because she rolled in late. I haven't seen Rhonda and sewing Nancy today, I don't think. Did I miss them saying hi? See, it's working. It's going to take you time. We're always in some kind of big rush, and we want to get like the whole thing run through in 2 seconds. You'll be amazed. Start leaving a little bit smaller hole when you have an opening, and you'll be amazed. I mean, don't go off the deep end and make it like, 1/2 inch. And I'm pushing out those ends where the box bottoms are. With the shape flex on, it almost feels like canvasy, this fabric. And I'm reaching inside. And while I'm here, I'm going to make sure there's my little box stand. And if you need to, you can run your point turner. And I'm running it right along that seam. This is a little basket, so there's not a lot of wiggle room there. And that pretty well opened well enough without the turner. But if you want to use the turner, but I always run the turner across that seam. See how I'm going across the seam? And look where that opening is. You'd barely know it was there. I would probably hand stitch this since it came out so nice. Because if I machine stitch it, I'm going to have to fold it back and create a seam stitch there, and it doesn't look as nice. So, see how nice that looks because you pressed it? Okay, so let's press our box corners, box bottoms. And you'll probably have your bigger iron, give it a shot of steam. I'm impressed with my opening. I may have to leave the opening just so every now and again I can look in it and admire it. Okay, so if you want to stitch your opening closed on the sewing machine, you're just going to take where the seam is and just fold it in half and stitch right along there. Okay? You want me to do it for you? All right, I'll do it. Let's sew it up. Just make sure nothing else is in your way, like this other corner. Make sure you've pulled them out of your way. It's so pretty. And I want to try to stitch close to the edge. So I'm going to do a locking stitch. And then a locking stitch. There you go. Can you see the little, back a little bit. Can you see that all right? It's right along that little edge. Okay, you made me do it. And let's clip those threads out. So let's see if we can see it better here. Oh, wait a minute. Which way do I have to go? This way. There it is right there. You see it right there? Okay, so now we got to just push the inside. Oh, Cammie, you wanted me to do it? Okay, I did, just for you. So we're going to push the lining in, and we want to line up. We want to line up where the box is on each side. Now, what I did on this one is I didn't roll my lining all the way back. And it really didn't matter. Can you see in there? It's still fine. It's just a hair above this. But, you know, you really wouldn't know it. So that gave me a little edge. A little, you know, decorative edge. So this one, wow, where did that big thread come from? This one I have all the way in so it's even. So here's how it is with a little bit of the, well, here, with a little bit of the lining hanging out, and here's not. And if you want a little lining hanging out, you're just gonna grab onto your outside one and just with your fingers kind of roll it up a bit. Let's see if I can get it rolled back up again. And all I'm doing is just reaching in and pulling that fabric up. But you want to make sure you kind of do it evenly the whole way around. And then after you get it all like that, then I'll tell you what you have to pay attention to when you do this. Okay, so now there it is with a little edge. So which way do you like? Edge, no edge? Before I press this, somebody take a vote. A little edge or no edge? I'll have to sit here and wait until somebody answers me. Just one person. Cammie, come on, you can tell me. Let's see. It's going to go with this. So what do you think? Having a little edge up? All right. I'm going to have to make the decision myself then. So I'm going to leave the edge up so I can show you how it's sewn. So I want to go ahead and press this. They look good either way. Thanks, Rose. That's really helpful. That's why I asked you guys to do it, because I liked it either way. Oh, you know what? I'm going to push this one all the way in, Rose. So then I have one of each kind. So I'm just bringing the front up. And then just pushing the lining in. Because I like that too. Oh, Lynn, come on, I just pushed it all in. All right. If you wanted to have more of an edge, you'd have to make your lining a little bigger, and in this case, it's a little harder to do. Okay, so there I am with my little edge. And I want to try to get it even the whole way around, but we've got to do some pressing. And this actually comes in handy when you have a little iron. Oh, Alberta's on it. She's got all capital letters. We better listen to Alberta. So I just want to press this so that when I go to stitch it, I don't have to fiddle around with making sure everything is right. So the little iron fits in there pretty good. So now probably on your ironing station, you'll have to be a 2-iron person now. You'll have to have the little iron and the big iron going. That seems like a disaster waiting to happen, doesn't it? And the reason that we're pressing it this way is if we pressed it from on top, you'd be making creases. Okay. Now, I'm sure mine's not perfect because I'm not going to go around with a ruler. But that does look kind of cute. So now and you don't have to, but now we're going to stitch this so it stays in place. So let me check, see if anybody has any questions. Nope, not a question, not a one. I want to make sure you hear me. I bet you do, Alberta. I hear you, Alberta, I hear you. Okay, so I'm going to stitch around. Now, I know this is a 4-letter word, but you could hand stitch it. Hand being the 4-letter word. You could hand stitch around with, relatively big stitches, but, they'd have to be straight or sort of straight. You don't have to do it at all because when this presses, it pretty much stays, and it isn't like you're going to be throwing it in the washing machine every, 5 minutes. But I want to show you how you have to stitch this because unless you have a machine that has a free arm this size, this isn't going to work. I'm trying to think back how far back you'd have to go to get a pretty narrow free arm. And I can't recall offhand. So we're going to have to stitch this from inside, which means we can't see where we're hitting here. So, and I left mine so you could see. So now, whoever's told me I had perfect stitching, here goes the truth. So I stitched along because I'm guessing from the inside. So I stitched along pretty good for in between in the ditch until I got here, and then see how my stitching is up here. So you're better off. I did a real good job here. I should just show here because that's a good job. So in this spot, can you see how I'm a little below with my white thread? See it there? So I think you're better off to go a little further in than try to stay close to the edge, because the reason that this happened this way is because see how my seam wasn't lined up perfect. So see, I got less here and then more fabric here. So that was the only spot that I had the issue. So let's go ahead and give it a whirl. Because it's just a little basket. So we're going to have to stitch this way. And even though this is tiny, it's not going to be hard. But I just noticed looking in the camera that I have a big wrinkle right here. So I want to make sure that I iron that out because I don't want to stitch in a wrinkle. I got enough wrinkles without stitching some in, right? Okay. So, and I'm going to start on whatever I think my back might be. I don't want to start right on a seam. I'll start a little past the seam. Starting on the seam, sometimes it can be too bunchy for some machines. So I'm going to start stitching about, let me see, where am I going? I'm going this way. So I'm going to start stitching right past that seam. So I can see my seam right there. I'm just going to go a little ways past it. And no matter how I stitch, I really want to try to stay with the same distance from the top if I can. So I'm placing my fabric So, and again, I got the J foot on. It's just inside. So you see this is metal right here. Then it's clear, and then it's metal. I'm just inside of the metal. I'm not going to lock my stitch because I'm going to stitch over it when I come back around. I'm just going to take my time. So I'm just going to get started. I'm on pivot, so my needle goes down, my foot comes up. Remember, my needle is my third hand. And I'm just going to roll this forward because remember, like when we stitched last week, we don't need a bunch of fabric behind us, but it's nice to have a nice straight path in front of us. And it's your bobbin thread that's going to show on the outside. So keep that in mind. If you put a decorative thread here, but you didn't put one in the bobbin, which I do a lot, I have to actually do the opposite. But I didn't want a decorative thread because that just, makes the eye go to something that I might not sew perfectly. I don't need to help make myself look bad. Oh, now I'm caught on that little seam. So just need a little help. And you notice I sew a little ways and I stop. Okay, I want to make sure this is nice and flat. Let me keep my hands out of your way this time. So I'm actually lined up with the 1/4 inch, see the 1/4 inch line of my bobbin cover. And I'm going to be watching for where I started. But you see, I'm just taking my time, even though it's a little tiny opening. I'm just going to take my time. And now I've passed over where I was, so I'm going to just stitch in place. I prefer not to stitch back 3 because that's even more stitching on top that is more noticeable to the eye. Okay? So there we are. Let me cut my little threads. And let's see, I'll give you an up close. Good or bad, you get an up close. So this time I went in a little more. Oh, let's see if we can get it to. And so you can see my stitching line. But nobody but you is going to care. As long as you keep it fairly even, nobody knows how it's supposed to look. Now that would be perfect right there. Look at that. But I'm okay with that. So now I just want to give the whole thing a little press. And this is a good place for your little hammy, and I still haven't found a place to get little hammies yet. So I'm just going to fold this down a little bit because I want to just press here. And that's just the wrinkling we had from when we turned it through. So I think I'll go see if I can, there we go. That works. Look, the whole iron fits in, almost. Oh, it's a tight squeeze. Let's put it on the purple side. So there we are. So you'll notice this one, everything's going in the right direction. And this one, everything is this way. So let me see. What you have to remember is on your 6 by 10 piece, I had the directional going the long way, the 10 way. The directional needs to go the 6 way. Does that make sense? So if you think about it, this is the middle of the fabric, the 10-inch piece. There's one end, there's the other end. So if it's laying this way, I had it directional going the long way, the 10-inch. But it doesn't end up being that way. So in this case, I had the fabric going directional the short way. I know, Lynn, I got to design a little hammy. I think that's a good idea. I got to decide what we fill it with. Yes. Put that on the list, Lynn, a little hammy. So there we are. Aren't they cute? Will that hold my little, oh, look at that. Look at that. Well, he's a little big. All right, he's a little big, but I could put my 2 favorite rulers in there. Maybe my snips. How's that? I'm trying to get a little neater with all these things I have. And I'm looking at this one thinking, oh my God, now I got to put a little baby pin cushion in here for some pins. But let's not go there today. Okay, so there we have it. I expect this time, everyone, I expect to see some little baskets, little, what do we call them? Clip baskets, little clip and pen baskets up on Miss Loreens Schoolhouse Facebook page on, let me see, when did I post that? Last night. I know it was late. On the post for this class. I want to see your little baskets, because come on, don't they make a cute little gift? You could put a little handle on it, like the little, like our Easter basket, and give people some jelly beans, little grass and jelly beans. Wouldn't that be cute? Let's see how much time we got before Easter. Oh, plenty of time. Okay, let me just check and see if you have any questions instead of me babbling along. So let's see. Rose says, really looks nice. It does. Thanks, Rose. It does look nice. And you're welcome, everybody. And really, give this one a whirl, because it's a couple of scraps, 6 by 10. If you want it taller, okay, let me think now. If you want it taller, I have to think for a minute now. Okay, so this is the 10, and this is the 6. So if you want it taller, you got to make it longer than 10. So make a note of that. If you want it taller, longer than 10. But I wouldn't want it much taller because it's a little sturdier when it's a little smaller, unless you use like Decker Bond. Oh, Alberta says I'm a star. Thanks, Alberta. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining in. And I really do hope, all kidding aside, I really do hope you make some of these, because they do make, for kids, kids love to have stuff to put their little trinkets in, whether boys or girls, it doesn't matter. My son loved to have anything he could put his little tiny cars, tiny pieces in. You could embroider their name on it. You put the embroidery on before you make it. So anyways, I hope you all make one. So thanks for joining in. This is next week. It'll have a template to download, so I'll post that Wednesday or so with the link for the download. So thanks again for everybody for joining in. If you're new to join in, please subscribe to Miss Loreens Schoolhouse. I would really appreciate it. Hit the thumbs up button. What is the other one? The bell to get the reminders, because it comes on. That's why I come on about 10-12 minutes before the live, so that you get the reminder and have time to go, oh yeah, I remember now, and get on and join in. So thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you either Thursday night at 7 or next Saturday at 1:30 next Saturday. You want to make a note. I have to work next Saturday. So next Saturday is 1:30. And again, I'll post that during the week as a reminder. So thanks again, everybody. Bye.